Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing into this fascinating dossier that's all about how German media is interpreting major events in the United States. And let me tell you, it's a pretty unique and frankly startling perspective on a key global ally.
So that's the big question, right? But the answer we're getting here isn't just about simple day-to-day news reporting. No, what this source material shows is a very specific analytical framework, a consistent way of looking at American events that honestly tells us just as much about Germany as it does about the US.
And that, right there, is the core finding. The dossier reveals this consistent story of a nation under some really intense stress, a country whose internal chaos is seen as having potentially dangerous consequences for the whole world. Okay, let's dive into this.
First things first, to really understand the analysis, we have to get a handle on the lens through which German media is viewing the United States. It's a very, very particular viewpoint.
Think of it as the perspective of a concerned observer, one that's deeply shaped by Germany's own history in the 20th century and, of course, its massive economic ties to a stable America. So for them, they're not just watching the news, they're trying to gauge the health of the entire global liberal order.
So, how does this lens actually work in practice? Well, the first case study from the dossier looks at the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, German media sees this not as some isolated crime, but as a symptom of a much deeper, more troubling problem in American society.
And what's really interesting is how the coverage described here just kind of moves right past the tragic details of the assassination itself. Instead, it zeroes in on how the event is being used, instrumentalized, especially by the far right.
The dossier highlights this view that what's happening isn't a spontaneous reaction, but a very deliberate strategy. The goal? Create a martyr, inflame divisions for political gain, and this is crucial for our European audience, provide a kind of playbook for far-right movements in their own backyards.
The specific language they use is also super telling. This German phrase, it translates to something like right-wing extremist with misanthropic views. Now, that is not neutral terminology. According to the analysis, it frames the event as a predictable, almost inevitable outcome of extremism itself.
And this is where you can really feel the depth of the concern. The analysis draws a direct, chilling parallel to the Reichstag fire, the event that was used to effectively end democracy in the Weimar Republic. For a German audience, that's not just a historical comparison, it's the ultimate warning signal.
Now, this whole theme of democratic erosion just keeps on going into the next area of focus. This time, the dossier examines the German perspective on the ongoing conflict between Donald Trump and the press.
And wow, the analysis here does not mince words. It frames Trump's actions, labeling the press the enemy of the people, suing newspapers, not as just politics, but as a systematic war. They explicitly compare his tactics to those used in totalitarian regimes to control information. This isn't just criticism. It's a massive historical alarm bell being rung loud and clear.
So here's the crucial point. From their perspective, Trump's actions aren't happening in a vacuum. They're seen as part of a global authoritarian playbook, kind of like what's been seen with leaders like Hungary's Viktor Orban. And that makes it an immediate, direct concern for other European democracies who are watching all of this unfold.
All right, for the final section of the dossier, we're going to see how this same critical lens gets applied to something that you might think is way more neutral: economics. So at first, the main German angle is pretty pragmatic and, well, self-interested. The analysis is all about the direct cause and effect for their export-driven economy. What does a weaker dollar mean for German cars, for German machinery, and for German consumers?
But if you dig deeper, beyond the balance sheets, the reporting emphasizes a much more profound worry. This rate cut came after intense, very public pressure from Trump, and that suggests a key pillar of the global financial system is bending to political will, which completely undermines the whole idea of institutional independence.
Okay, so when you put all three of these stories together, the political violence, the attacks on the press, and the politicization of the economy, a single, really coherent picture starts to emerge from the German perspective.
So when you lay it all out, a really clear pattern emerges. Each story, seen through that transatlantic lens, is basically interpreted as more evidence of the exact same trend: the decay of democratic institutions and norms in the United States.
And that is the unifying theme. From this German viewpoint, the U.S. is seen as shifting away from its role as a beacon of democracy and is instead becoming a potential source of global instability.
So at the end of the day, this reporting isn't just about America. By constantly drawing these parallels, it becomes a stark cautionary tale for Germany and for the rest of Europe. It's a warning about the fragility of their own democratic systems.
And that leaves us with a really provocative question, doesn't it? What happens when a key ally begins to see you not as a source of strength, but as a source of instability? It's a question with profound implications, not just for politics or trade, but for the very future of the transatlantic relationship.